Mhm. Welcome to English Without Borders. Dear audience, dear followers of English Without Borders network, and who are watching us via Facebook and who joined us via Zoom platform. So we are very happy to see you. And today we are continuing our Thursday series of English Without Borders webinars. And today we are hosting Theresa North, and she will talk about using task-based lessons to foster English and soft skills. And let me just give a brief introduction of our speaker today. Theresa North has over 25 years of experience teaching English as a foreign language to students in the United States, Peru, Greece, and Morocco. She has also presented workshops and webinars to her TEFL colleagues and has trained K-12 teachers in Peru and Morocco in the fields of second language pedagogy and the use of digital resources. After receiving her BA and MA from the University of Texas, Theresa lives in California briefly before moving to Oregon. In 2019, she was selected as an English language fellow and taught in Casablanca, Morocco. Then she worked as a virtual English language fellow training Moroccan EFL teachers, STEM teachers, Ministry of Education officials, and professionals. Since September 2021, Theresa has been coordinating a volunteer online survival English course for immigrants in the United States, which she created. Welcome, Theresa. We are so excited to host you today. And please, I'm giving the floor to you. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Nasiba, and thank you for hosting this. I enjoy watching. I've seen several of the other English Without Borders webinars, and it's really great to see the sharing, and with people from all over the world, not just in Tajikistan. So hopefully I will have something to add to everyone's toolkit, as I like to call it, so that when we're in the classroom, we have yet another tool to pull out and use. So I'm coming to you from Morocco currently. It's afternoon, and I'm going to talk today, as Nasiba said, about task-based lessons and how that can foster not only English acquisition, but also soft skills. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's see here. And let's see. And can everyone see that? Yeah? Okay. So, and I like to say this is task-based lessons because we want to use English to do something. I love languages, but the end goal is to be able to do something with the language that we're teaching and that we're using. So to start, I like to give a little map, an overview of where we're going today. So we're going to talk at the beginning about some important language skills. What do we think those are? And I'll be asking for your input. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about the classic lesson plan and then the task-based lesson plan. And I'll explain the format, but then I'm going to give some examples. And I will also solicit examples from you because I'm sure that some of you have examples of task-based lessons that you're using in your classroom. Finally, we'll talk a little bit about games as a task. And then I'll finish with talking about working with subject teachers. And it was interesting listening to last week's webinar with Lisa Mann because she mentioned realia and trying to connect language with what we're doing in the world. And so we'll be addressing that when we're talking about working with subject teachers. It's something that I really, really like to do. So first of all, language skills. What are some language skills? As English teachers or language, what do we need to be able to do with language? So if you would write in the chat some examples of skills that you think are important in a language. Okay, speaking. And okay, speaking, listening, chatting, writing. And when we say those, what would we use them for? So when we're speaking, we use speaking and writing for many different things. Okay, vocabulary, communication. So can you be a little more specific? For example, one thing that we use communication for is to describe something. So describing would be a skill that we might use language for. Language definitely influences your thinking. Yeah, explaining. That was also part of the webinar last week, was we might use language to give directions, right? Or to ask questions. Messaging. I like that. We're so 21st century now. Giving instructions, yeah. Okay, clarifying. So when we think of language skills, we can think of language skills as something that we might use language for, or we can get even more specific, like with clarifying and defining, and ask ourselves, for us and for our students, if our students were to become scientists, what do they need language for? If they were to be historians or writers, okay, comparing and contrasting, the defining, yes, exactly. Describing, okay, persuading and critical thinking, yes, exactly. And analyzing. We don't use English in a vacuum. We use it to do all of these things. And those are predicting, those are the things that we do with language, our native language. And we want our students and ourselves to be able to do that in a foreign language. So let's see here. Let's see if I can, there we go. So as you said, describing, clarifying, comparing and contrasting, hypothesizing, right? Justifying. So not only being able to give your opinion, but to be able to explain why. And all of these, as you can see, there was an English language specialist, Amanda Fox, who was talking specifically about STEAM and English. And these were some of the language skills that she pointed out young scientists need. So as we all know as teachers, just because you covered it, that doesn't mean they learned it, right? And sometimes, unfortunately, we don't find that out until we assess. we need to find that out a little bit earlier. And so we're going to look at how task-based lessons can help us discover that they didn't learn something we thought they did. And we can bring it up again, maybe in a different way. Okay. So the classic lesson format. And when I say that, I'm not talking about the 1970s. I'm talking about now. What do we generally do when we create a lesson? We have the lead in, right? Get students interested. And then we present something. We give facts or concepts or skills, and we can deliver those in many different ways. And then we have guided practice and application, where we help the students apply what they've learned. Then independent practice and application, and then finally, assessment. The question that we have to ask ourselves is, are we skipping the guided practice and application? And we may be, and sometimes it may be that it's a time crunch. I mean, I've had classes where I met with the students for 2 hours once a week. And I was expected, and I tried to shove as much as possible into their heads in that 2 hours as I possibly could. So is there a way we can do that and still be able to give them time in class to practice, and we can watch and see if they're able to apply it? So as most of you know, in order to learn something, we need to do it. And this isn't just for English students, right? This is for all of us. So here you have the stages of a task-based lesson. And we're going to go through these, and I'll explain them, and then I'll give you an example. But when you're looking at these, are there soft skills that also will be part of this? So in the chat, when we talk about soft skills, can you think of soft skills that are going to be fostered by doing these things? Yeah, analyzing and communication. Debate, yeah. And learning how to debate or communicate in a constructive way. Okay. So we're going to go through those individually, and you can see what they look like in a task-based lesson. So in the pre-task, we do the lead-in. We get students interested. We explore the topic. Okay. How might we do that? Any suggestions? If you want to add something in the chat on a lead-in or an intro to a topic that you use in your class. Okay, giving vocabulary. And when you give vocabulary, do you just give word lists, or do you embed the vocabulary in something? It always depends on the topic, definitely. Okay, so we provide information, right? We might, for example, we might show pictures, right? We might give examples. We might ask questions, yes. Definitely activating their schemata. So Natia, the question was, what are some examples of a intro to a topic or a lead-in that you share with your students? Okay, pictures, video, yes. Pictures would be the low-tech version, right? If you don't have a lot of technology, or videos, very short videos, articles. Okay, titles, yeah. Quotes. Okay, problems, yes. Definitely problems, especially if they're interesting problems or situations. Games, yes. Right, you want to activate background knowledge. Okay, yeah, with some thought-provoking questions. You might do a survey for your students. Predicting. A warm-up, yeah. And someone mentioned articles. That can be something that you have them do as a pre-reading, right? Maybe you have them do that before they come to class. The nice thing about doing that is that it's scaffolding. The pre-reading can be scaffolding for your lower level students because they can read it more than once. Sometimes when you give something to read in class, the higher level students, you know, just zip through, it's easy. And you have the lower level students who are struggling. So if you have them pre-read something, they can read more than once. Okay, so part of your pre-task with a task-based lesson is you need to introduce the topic. The other thing you have to do is explain the task, okay? With task-based lessons, you as the teacher have chosen the task. And you need to tell them what it is. You need to tell them exactly what you're expecting from them. So what is the finished project? Is it a poster? Is it a dialogue? Is it a paragraph? Is it perhaps a graph that you're having them fill out? Okay. So what is the finished product? When is it due? Is it due at the end of class? Or are you going to give them time in class and then have them give them the opportunity to work at home with a partner and come back to class, to the next class? And then sometimes we choose who will work together, right? Sometimes we choose to put higher level English with lower level English, because even though they might have more English, they might not have as much knowledge about the topic. And so then they're each bringing something to the group that they're working in. We might choose to separate people who tend to get a little crazy in class, okay? It's completely up to us, but we need to let them know who will work together. So that's all part of the pre-task. Any questions about that? If you have a question, don't hesitate to put it in the chat. Okay. So now moving on to the task cycle. The task cycle has 3 pieces. Okay. First, you have the task. And so students are doing the task and the teacher is monitoring. The teacher's walking around, and this is where that 3rd piece of the lesson plan, this is where we can do that. We can see, we can assess, are the students understanding the vocabulary? Are the students understanding the grammatical structure that we wanted them to learn? Okay, we're also monitoring to make sure that they're staying on task and that they're moving along, they're able to work together as a group. But that's all in the task part. With that, the students are also working on planning because they've been given a task, but they're going to have to create some kind of list or outline. They're going to need to break the task into smaller pieces. So this is where you really have the soft skills coming in, right? They're going to have to choose roles or responsibilities for each other. Are they all working on everything? If you have them creating a poster, then it may be that one of them is an amazing artist. Probably that's the one who's going to be creating the art on the poster. Okay. And this isn't, task and planning are together, right? You're going to move from one to the other and then back again. They're going to have to be revisiting. Are we on time? Do we need to speed things up? If the teacher comes over and says, I don't think you're understanding this, then we're going to have to revisit something. We're going to have to make sure that we understand what we're doing. And the last part of the task cycle is the actual reporting. So if the teacher said, we're going to work on this topic today, and by the end of class, I want you to have created a poster, that will be the report. The students will have the poster finished at the end of class. Okay, so that's the task cycle right there. And we'll look at some examples of that in just a minute. But are there any questions? And for some reason, I cannot see the chat box. So Nasiba, if somebody asks a question, will you let me know?
Yes, so by now, like everyone is listening to your presentation, and after your presentation, we'll give the floor to question and answers.
Okay. Okay, so the next part is analysis. Okay, and analysis is 2 pieces. Okay, the first one is examine the topic. Okay, so that's where if the report was presented to the class, that's where students or the teacher can ask questions to clarify about the topic. Okay, I didn't understand, for example, if the task was to decide and create a poster, or if the task was to create a presentation on how to eat a more healthy diet, for example, this would be where the students could say, well, why did you say that we should eat 5 fruits and vegetables? I don't understand that. This might also be where you would agree or disagree I think that cake is okay to eat, for example. And they can express opinions. But there's also an analysis of the language, because we're language teachers, okay? And that's where you're going to be able to ask questions about the language that was used. Were there any errors that led to misunderstanding? And the nice thing about when you do have the report presented to the class as a whole is that this is also when you can make sure that other students are understanding what different groups did. So they're being exposed to the grammar and languages, not just of their group, but of all the groups. And as the teacher, you can ask, are there other ways to express this same idea? If you're hypothesizing, which is a higher order thinking skill, are there other grammatical structures that we could use to do that? Okay. So that's all in the analysis. And the last piece is practice. And you can do that one of two ways. You can do that in class. And if you have a lower level English class, that might be something as simple as practicing new vocabulary aloud. Okay. You might have students writing together. They might write something together in pairs, maybe a paragraph. You might, and I like to do this when I do have either lower level English speakers or very diverse levels. So like a multi-level class. I like to have the whole class write something together. I'm writing it on the board, but they're all adding to the finished product. You can also have them write something and then peer edit. Okay, and that can be something they turn in as they're leaving. If you don't have time to do that, then you can have them do the practice at home. You could have them answer questions, write about the topic. Okay. You could also have them take the vocabulary or grammar and use it in a different task at home. So if you had them compare or contrast different weather on 2 different days, okay, and that this was a nicer day and that day was not as nice, or you're having them learn vocabulary for describing people, then you can have them do that with a different task, a different picture at home, and then have them turn that in. So this is also a way to assess what they got out of the lesson before doing a more formal assessment, like a test, for example. Okay, so those are the different pieces of a task-based lesson. So here's an example of a task-based lesson. What do you think the topic is going to be for this one? Any ideas? Ah, there we go. There's the chat. Okay, so maybe on water, nature, okay. Any other ideas what the topic might be? Okay, very good. Yes, this is definitely a higher level science topic. It's on habitat. Yes. And I can't pronounce her name. Gulchera? Yes? Okay. So good job. That's exactly what the topic is. And so you might have them as a pre-task, work in pairs or groups, and just chat about which ecosystem, which habitat would be the best one for humans to live in. Okay, that's going to be part of your pre-task. Remember, you might have had them do, and you probably did have them do, some pre-reading. Okay, and we'll talk in a minute about whether you had them do the pre-reading or whether you know that they have a science class where they did the pre-reading. Okay, but the vocabulary is going to be a little bit more specific. And so probably a pre-reading is going to help them. So their task, and we're going to imagine that you have lots of time with them for this particular task-based lesson. They're going to research the ecosystems, and they're going to choose the best ecosystem for humans. Okay? And they need to give reasons to support the decision. And once they've done that, they're going to create a short presentation. And they need to do it by the end of this 3-hour class. Because remember, I need to give them a timeline. So now I'm going to send them off in groups. I'm letting them choose their own groups. And they're going to take time to plan. How are they going to complete the task and the presentation? Maybe they are fortunate, like these people here, and they have computers and they can look up a lot of information in class and do the research there. Maybe you send them to the library and they do some research there. At the end of that class, they're going to do a short presentation. And they're going to need to share with their peers what ecosystem they chose and why it was the best choice. As part of your analysis, then there's going to be discussion in class. Why did they choose this ecosystem? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Why do you disagree? Okay. Also, that's going to be where you're going to talk about the language that was used to hypothesize. Okay, what would happen if you lived in the desert? Would you have enough water? And then finally, you might send them home and have them write about an ecosystem that they didn't choose. And they might use comparative structures to write a paragraph or an essay. So that's an example, just one example of a task-based lesson. So, as I said before, but I really think it's important to mention again, just because someone is low-level English doesn't mean they're low-level science or low-level math. And we know this, right? So we might have them do something in our high beginner class, high beginning English class, where they're going to be doing something like creating a graph, because they learned how to create a graph in math last year. Here you can see, perhaps we told them that they needed to go around and ask everyone how many pencils they had, how many pens, how many erasers, how many sharpeners, okay? And then they had to make a graph of the school supplies that the students had. That's very basic English, right? They're learning classroom vocabulary there, but they're using it for math. We might also have them make a poster. And in this one, you can see, perhaps you were having them work on commands. Okay, wash your hands, wear a face mask. So again, they've got a high level of science knowledge and a low level of English. If we're looking at English for history, now this is for a higher level English class, we might have them write and perform a dialogue about a historical event. Okay. So both of these, English for STEM subjects, science, tech, engineering, and math, and English for history, they fall into that, what I mentioned at the beginning, which was using English for something that we're doing someplace else. Okay, so as Lisa mentioned last week, the whole realia part. Well, we know our students aren't just taking English. They're taking science or history or math. And if we can find a way for them to see how those come together, then and overlap and can be mutually of each other, then that's what we're doing. We're bringing it into their daily lives or their educational lives. So the last thing I wanted to mention was games. And I said at the beginning that games can be described as a task, right? Because the goal is to win, but it is a task. So taking the language skill of describing, we have the games 20 questions or I Spy. 20 questions, well, actually for both of them, one person will think of something, and with 20 questions, everyone else can ask questions, but the questions are only yes or no. Now, it might seem like that's a lower level English game, but it's not, depending on the vocabulary. So you can see in this vocabulary, you've got, is it an animal? But you also have, is it a mammal? Right? As soon as one person guesses, by the way, the answer was dog. As soon as one person guesses, then that person is now the person thinking, and a new round starts. The other one is I Spy. And this one is generally lower level English. I Spy with my little eyes, something that begins with the letter. And I mean, I can use this in my very beginning English class. The whole first phrase, I spy with my little eye, is a construct that is repeated over and over. So it's not necessary that they understand every word there. What they're trying to guess is vocabulary. Is it seat? No. Is it student? Yes. So to practice classroom vocabulary, you could use this game. Here are some other games. 20 questions, same or different? Are they the same? Are they different? Which one doesn't belong between two numbers? And then we also have scavenger hunt, which could be oral, but also could be written. So if you're wanting them to work on their reading skills. Okay. So that is task-based lesson. I'll be presenting next week on project-based learning, and which is, it's kind of like task-based lessons at a completely different level. So it's jumping jumping way up. And I've included my contact information there in case you had other questions. But do you have questions right now that you'd like to ask? Or suggestions if you have ideas for task-based lessons?
Yeah, thank you very much, Theresa. Like, very informative, and also like you provided such nice exercises that even the participants got engaged into that exercises. So thank you very much. And now let's open the floor to questions and answers. Like, dear audience, feel free to write down your questions in the chat box. And also all those who are watching us on Facebook, you can put your question in the comment box and we will be addressing those questions to our speaker. So Theresa, we have one question already here ready for you. Is the order always the same as you have described?
Yes, the order is always the same, but there are additional pieces that you can add. So, for example, when we looked at the pre-task, I mentioned that you can give them a pre-reading the night before. And you might add more time to the task. And if you do, you could give them other things to do at home because they'll have more time to do them. But other than that, the order is always the same. And that's probably partly because this is how the thing about task-based lessons is they're a reflection of how we do things in the real world, right? We think about something first and we think about what we want to do, and then we have to put it into some format to help ourselves accomplish it. We break it down into smaller pieces and we give ourselves a timeline. And then we do it. And then hopefully, and this is what we want to encourage our students, we reflect on how it went. Maybe make notes for next time, like I shouldn't do this, or this worked really well. If we can encourage that in our students and they start doing that in their lives, I think they become better students overall. So.
Thank you, Theresa. So we have next question. What are the advantages and disadvantages of the topic you presented, like of task-based?
Okay, well, so what I just said about it being a reflection of our daily lives, of our real lives outside the classroom would be one advantage. Another advantage, as I mentioned, is that it really promotes not just language acquisition, but it promotes soft skill acquisition, right? We want our students to not only learn English, but we want them to learn to work with others. We want them to be able to think critically. We want them to have good time management. All of those skills are fostered by task-based lessons. And other advantages, I would say another advantage is for the teacher. As I mentioned, I'm sure, like me, you don't like to wait for the assessment to find out that 1/3 of your class did not understand the lesson that you gave on hypothesizing, using grammatical structures to make a hypothesis. You would rather know that ahead of time, help them learn it, and then when you get to the assessment, it's not a shock because you've several times gone through the process of determining what they know, what they don't know, and helping them fill in those gaps. So I would say the advantages aren't just for the students, I think they're for the teacher too.
Thank you. Great. We have next question. Marabo is asking, some learning happens after the task is done, right? Or it can happen during, the process.
Definitely. The learning can happen during the pre-task, but it definitely happens during the lesson, during the task. And then at the end, as I mentioned, when you have students presenting, you have all of these different ways of coming to a subject, different linguistic structures that they're going to be using. And all of their classmates who are listening are learning during that process as well, right? We know that it's not just when you're producing, a lot of times, more than half the time, you're gaining a lot of knowledge when it's coming in from others.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. We have more questions here. What assessment strategies can be used in task-based lessons?
Well, I think part of the reason that I am so drawn to task-based lessons is it's not simply a sit down and write the exam assessment. And honestly, that's not how we use English, right? So to me, having students be able to do something with the language is actually a more accurate representation of what they know in the language. So I would say using the task itself as an assessment would be really important.
Yeah.
I do know that depends a little bit on your administration. So you need to be able to figure out a way to word it, perhaps, so that your administrators are okay with having a task-based lesson be part of your assessment. I know there are those confinements.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Theresa. We have a comment from Buchira. She's saying, integrating language learning and other subjects is a core of task-based and topic-based language learning approaches. It stimulates motivation in language learning by bringing, by bringing interesting topics and activating science skills. So, can you just share some examples of how you do this task-based approach in Morocco, like, by bringing like a glimpse of your lessons, how you do that?
Well, interestingly, so during my time in Morocco, I not only taught English teachers, but I also worked with STEM teachers who have been tasked by the Ministry of Education to start incorporating English into their classes. And yeah, and then they said, what? We don't know how to teach English. Why are you asking us to do this? And so that was part of my task, was to help them see how to use another language to still teach the science and math and engineering and tech that they were supposed to be teaching. It does make sense that the ministry asked them to do this, because a lot of the professional research and journals are in English. So having students learn in English to do those things was obviously logical. But I taught a lot of pedagogy to them on making their classes more communicative. And in that way, they could bring in more language into their class. So not just having their students sit down with a worksheet, but actually, for example, using math to measure something that we would need in daily life. I want to paint a wall in my house. How much paint do I need, right? I want to, there's a very good video on YouTube actually on an American teacher who uses task-based lessons to figure out why our stairs in the US now are supposed to be a certain height and width. Why? Yeah. Well, because that's how normal people step. And so he used a task-based lesson. And so bringing that to my Moroccan teachers, they could use it as a way to incorporate English into their math class. So,
yeah. Yeah, so it resembles me about the situation because in Suk region as well in Tajikistan, you know, the education department started like to kind of to encourage teachers who are preparing students for the international Olympiads, because like, you know, again, English is essential for participating in these international Olympiads. And now we can see that they understand that, you know, the teachers need to get in touch with English language teachers to make this process, you know, move faster, and also just to bring results. Because like for every school, if the students are participating in international competitions or contests, it's kind of a privilege, but at the same time, it helps, you know, to build the teacher professional development as well, because the teachers are building not only their science skills, but also they're building their language skills. So which makes sense, which makes a big sense. Yeah, thank you very much. So we have next question. What levels of English classes task-based can be used and you recommend?
okay, I'll answer that one. I would add one thing to what you just said. If you can, this is for everyone, if you can foster a good relationship with other teachers in your school, I mean, hopefully you have that anyway, then I think it can make the learning so much more dynamic and interesting for your students and their students at the same time. So hopefully you have those interactions in the faculty meeting room, the staff room.
Thank
for
you.
For task-based lessons, that was the reason I put in some examples of very low-level English that you can use, because I would say once you get to high beginning, I think that from that point on, you're able to use task-based lessons, right? And honestly, even in very beginning classes, we use a sort of task, right? We have them when they're doing introductions. You know, we have them go around and introduce themselves to different people. Maybe we give them a sheet, a worksheet that says, okay, you have to introduce, and we tell them, you have to introduce yourself to 6 people, get their name and where they were born, right? So, and you have to fill this out by the end of class. Well, that's a task, right? That is a task. And we might use that just, you know, after 1 month of English, because they're learning introductions. So I think it could be used for any level.
Yeah, so thank you. Now we have next question. What challenges can teachers face when implementing task-based in their classes?
I think, let's see. I would say, first of all, to be honest, time, right? Like I said, in Morocco, I not only was training teachers, but I actually did teach at the university in Casablanca. And I met with my students for 2 hours once a week. So in that constraint, I had to do pre-class activities with them. You know, I had to give them something to do outside of class so that when they came to class, we could use that 2 hours really, really well. The other thing I would say is some of you, I don't know exactly what the situation is in Tajikistan, but you may have to convince administration that being able to do a task is an accurate assessment just as much as a test would be. So that would be 2 that I can imagine.
Yeah, thank you for your great recommendations. And we have the last question here. What are the STEM Moroccan teachers' level of English? and how can they incorporate English and STEM?
Okay, so we had STEM teachers who had from high beginning all the way up to advanced. So I mean, so if you're working with a STEM teacher and they have a lower level of English, it's not a problem. Okay, we had every level. Well, we didn't have very beginners, but you know, high beginners. And yeah, and so the examples that I gave were examples of incorporating English into a STEM class. Yeah, so.
Yeah, it sounds great. So I would recommend, like, you know, maybe somewhere, you know, sometime in the future, we could organize some forum of STEM and English teachers, you know, between Morocco and Tajikistan, because I think that would be really great to share the knowledge and also, you know, the knowledge and also sharing the experience and skills as well, because this is something like, you know, nowadays everywhere is being fostered, like, you know, incorporating STEM and English and making, like, you know, them to be integrated in the curriculum. So yeah, thank you very much. So Theresa, just, you know, we are so grateful to you for a very interesting presentation. And we hope that next week we will be able to explore more in this field, like about project-based, yeah, learning and project-based classes. So thank you very much. And it was really interesting and informative. And I'm sure, like, you know, teachers now kind of generating some good ideas, like, you know, to use how to use those task-based approach in their classes, and also how to make this much more engaging for the students. Thank you very much. And of course, I'm grateful to all the regular followers of English Without Borders who are joining us via Zoom platform as well as on Facebook. Thank you for joining, and thank you for being active part of English Without Borders. And yeah, thank you very much for everybody for your inputs, for your questions, for your active participation. We are looking forward to our next webinar with Theresa next week. Please stay tuned on us. And yeah, wishing everybody to have a good evening. Thank you. Thank you, Theresa. Stay well, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.